They say you never truly see something until you're ready to. In hindsight, I should have noticed the way she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes. How her hand lingered a second too long on his arm. How his eyes always seemed to find hers across the room. But I didn't. Or maybe I just didn't want to. It started on a Friday evening, one of those perfect summer nights where the air was warm, the drinks were cold, and the company, at least on the surface, was easy. My wife, Laura, and I were hosting a small dinner party, just a few close friends, some old colleagues, and of course Ben and Sophie. Ben had been a family friend for years. Our kids played together, we vacationed together, and I even helped him renovate his deck last summer. He was easygoing, funny, and just the right kind of charming to make him likable without setting off any alarms. At least, that's what I used to think. The night started out fine. Music playing, glasses clinking, conversation flowing. But as the evening went on, I started noticing small things. Ben and Laura were laughing together. A lot. Too much. I told myself it was nothing. They'd always been friendly. But then there was the way she leaned into him when he whispered something in her ear, her fingers grazing his forearm as she reached past him for the wine. It was subtle, but the kind of subtle that makes your stomach twist. I told myself I was imagining it. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was standing by the kitchen, clearing plates, when I saw them out on the deck. Laura was looking at Ben in a way that wasn't just friendly. It was charged. And then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering just a moment too long. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't accuse her or cause a scene. Instead, I played my part, smiling, pouring drinks, making conversation. But beneath the surface, something had cracked. That night, as Laura curled up next to me in bed, her body warm and familiar, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I needed to know the truth, and so I made a plan. The next morning, Laura acted like nothing had happened. She hummed softly as she made coffee, her robe loosely tied, looking every bit the devoted wife she had always been. But now I saw her differently. It was subtle. The way she glanced at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her smile lingered when she read a message, the slight tension in her shoulders when I walked up behind her. I wanted to be wrong. I needed to be wrong. But I wasn't. That day, I decided I wasn't going to let this gnaw at me in silence. I wasn't going to confront her without proof. I needed to be smart, methodical. So I did what any rational, paranoid husband would do. I started watching. I kept it simple at first. I paid closer attention to the details, the way she dressed, the way she used her phone, the excuses she made. She had always been careful, but now I realized just how careful. That afternoon, she told me she was heading to the store to pick up groceries. "Want me to come?" I asked, watching for her reaction. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled. "It's fine, babe. I'll be quick." She was gone for an hour and a half. When she got home, the bags were filled with the usual. Milk, eggs, vegetables. But something wasn't right. I checked the receipt when she wasn't looking. She had paid for everything at 3:10 p.m. She got home at 3:50. So where had she been for those 40 minutes? I didn't ask. Not yet. That night, after she fell asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took her phone. It was risky, but I had to know. I knew her passcode, our anniversary. I told myself I wasn't going to dig too deep, just a quick check. Just enough to prove my suspicions were nothing but paranoia. Except they weren't. There were no messages from Ben. No calls. Nothing. Too clean. Too perfect. Then I checked her deleted messages. That's when I found it. "Ben? Tomorrow, usual time?" "Laura, yes. Can't wait." The message was from 2 days ago. They were careful, but not careful enough. A part of me wanted to shake her awake right then and there, demand answers, demand the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I put her phone back exactly as I found it and lay beside her, my mind racing. Tomorrow I'd follow her. Tomorrow I'd know for sure. And once I did, I had no idea what I was going to do. The next day, I woke up before Laura, lying still as I listened to her breathing. Slow, steady, peaceful, as if nothing in the world was wrong. but everything was wrong. I forced myself through the morning routine, acting normal. We had breakfast together. She smiled at me over her coffee like she always did, kissed me on the cheek before heading to the shower, like she wasn't planning to meet another man today. I didn't ask her where she was going. I didn't have to. At exactly 11:45 a.m., Laura grabbed her purse, gave me a quick, casual "see you later," and walked out the door. I waited 2 minutes, then followed. Her car was easy to tail. She took a familiar route at first, the same one she used for errands, the grocery store, the dry cleaners. But then, at the last intersection before downtown, she made a sudden left turn. Not toward the store. Not toward anywhere she had reason to be. I stayed 3 cars behind, my pulse hammering in my throat. She turned again, into the parking lot of a small boutique hotel. Not a chain. Not a big name. Just one of those quiet, out-of-the-way places where no one asks questions. I pulled into a gas station across the street, watching through the windshield. Laura sat in her car for a minute, maybe checking her phone, maybe fixing her hair. Then she stepped out. She wasn't dressed like a woman running errands. Tight jeans, a blouse unbuttoned just enough, heels she never wore when she was just going shopping. And then, just as I feared, a second car pulled in. Ben. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. He parked 2 spots away, got out casually, wearing a simple polo and jeans, like this was just any other day. But it wasn't. Laura glanced around, just for a second, then walked toward the hotel entrance. Ben followed. They didn't walk in together. That would be too obvious. Laura went in first. Ben waited a minute, checking his phone like he had all the time in the world. Then he followed. I sat in my car, staring at the hotel door, my vision tunneling. I had my proof, but somehow knowing didn't feel like enough. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I got out of the car, and I went inside. The hotel lobby smelled like cheap air freshener and desperation. A bored-looking receptionist sat behind the front desk, clicking through her phone, barely glancing up as I walked in. I had no plan, just rage and a sinking feeling in my gut. Laura and Ben were nowhere in sight. I scanned the small seating area, the hallway leading to the elevator. No sign of them. I forced myself to move slowly, walking past the reception desk like I had every right to be there. The receptionist barely looked up. Checking in. I shook my head. Just waiting for someone. She nodded, already back to scrolling. I moved toward the hallway, taking a slow breath. Then I saw it. The elevator light blinked from the 2nd floor. They were up there. I stared at the panel. Only 3 floors. Not a big hotel. Not a lot of places to hide. I forced my fists to unclench. Think. Don't be reckless. If I stormed up there now, what would I do? What would I say? I could hear the conversation already. It's not what you think. You're being paranoid. I just needed to talk to him about something. No, that wasn't good enough. I needed something undeniable. So I stepped away from the desk, pulled out my phone, and called my friend Matt. Matt worked in private security. Surveillance. The kind of guy who knew how to get information without being noticed. Hey man, what's up? He answered. I need a favor, I said quietly. And I need you to ask no questions. There was a pause, then a sigh. How bad? I looked up at the ceiling, as if I could see them through it. Bad. Where are you? I gave him the name of the hotel. I'll be there in 20, he said. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. I hung up, my fingers gripping my phone so hard it nearly cracked. I had 20 minutes to sit in that lobby, staring at the elevator, knowing my wife was upstairs with another man. 20 minutes to wonder how long this had been going on. 20 minutes to imagine what they were doing. I clenched my jaw, breathing through my nose. I had waited this long. I could wait a little longer. But when the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, I wasn't sure I could wait at all. The elevator doors slid open, and I felt my pulse hammer against my ribs. But it wasn't them. An older couple stepped out, chatting softly, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I forced myself to relax, unclenching my fists, and settled back into my chair in the corner of the lobby. Matt showed up exactly 18 minutes later, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket, blending in like he was just another guy waiting for someone. He didn't even look at me at first, just strolled past, grabbed a newspaper from a nearby stand, and took a seat a few feet away. "Which room?" he muttered, low enough that only I could hear. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "They went up about 20 minutes ago." Matt didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a small notepad, and scribbled something on a page before tearing it out. Then, without looking at me, he dropped it onto the coffee table between us. I picked it up, pretending to read it like a casual note. "Front desk keeps a log of checked-in guests. Give me 5 minutes." I gave the slightest nod, then watched as he stood, stretched like he was just killing time, and wandered toward the receptionist. I didn't know exactly what Matt said to her. Maybe he flashed a fake badge. Maybe he dropped a name that made her nervous. Whatever it was, it worked. Less than 3 minutes later, he walked back, picked up a magazine, and sat down again. "Room 214, he muttered. "Checked in under Ben's name. Single king bed." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Now what?" I asked, my voice tight. Matt exhaled slowly, like he knew what I was thinking. "You want proof, right?" I nodded. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a tiny, black device no bigger than a thumb drive. "Wireless audio recorder," he said. "Super sensitive. You stick this under the door, you'll hear everything." My hands felt cold as I took it. I stood slowly, adjusting my jacket. My legs felt stiff, like I had been sitting in that chair for hours instead of minutes. Matt didn't try to stop me. He just leaned back, arms crossed, watching like a man who had seen this kind of thing before. I moved toward the hallway. My breathing felt too loud. At the end of the corridor, I found the door to room 214. I didn't knock. I didn't kick it down. I just crouched, careful, quiet, and slid the tiny recorder beneath the gap under the door. And then I waited. First, there was nothing. Then, I heard a soft, breathless laugh. Laura's laugh. Then Ben's voice, low and amused. Then a sound I will never forget. The sound of my wife moaning his name. I closed my eyes. I had my proof. But suddenly, proof didn't feel like enough. I reached for the doorknob and twisted. For a moment, no one moved. Laura was on the bed, her blouse unbuttoned, hair tousled. Ben stood beside her, frozen mid-motion, his belt undone. Their eyes locked onto mine, and in that split second, I saw everything. Guilt, panic, fear, and worst of all, recognition. They knew they were caught. Laura was the first to move. She scrambled to pull her blouse closed, stammering something I didn't bother processing. Ben, on the other hand, did what I knew he would. He went for the excuses. "Man, this isn't what it looks like." I lunged. I don't remember making the decision, don't remember crossing the room, but suddenly my fist was colliding with his jaw. The crack of impact was so satisfying it almost dulled the roaring in my ears. Almost. Ben stumbled back, crashing against the nightstand. The lamp toppled over, shattering against the floor. "Jack, stop!" Laura shrieked, throwing herself between us, her hands pressing against my chest. "Please, just listen to me." I shoved her off, breathing hard. "Listen? To you." My voice came out sharp, venomous. "You want me to listen while I stand here and watch you fix your shirt after screwing him?" Ben groaned from the floor, clutching his face. "Jesus, Jack." I turned on him. "You shut your goddamn mouth, or I swear to God, I'll break your teeth next." He held up a hand, still dazed, but wisely didn't say another word. Laura was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But I wasn't stupid. She wasn't crying because she was sorry. She was crying because she got caught. I took a step back, forcing myself to breathe. Matt was still by the door, arms crossed, watching everything unfold. I turned to Laura. "How long?" She swallowed hard. "Jack, how long?" She flinched at the force of my voice, then wiped at her tears. 6 months, she whispered. I laughed, the sound hollow. 6 months. Ben groaned again, trying to sit up. My rage flared, but this time I didn't move. Not because I wasn't angry, because I had something better planned. I turned back to Matt. You got the camera? He nodded, pulling his phone from his pocket. Got the whole thing. Laura paled. Wait, what? Ben's face drained of color. You recorded this? I smiled, slow and cold. Oh yeah, crystal clear. Laura looked between us, her breath coming fast. Jack, please. Shut up, I said, voice deadly calm. You don't get to beg me for anything anymore. I turned, heading for the door. Ben exhaled in relief, too soon. I stopped, looking at him over my shoulder. By the way, I said, Sophie's gonna love seeing this. His face crumpled in horror. Because Sophie, his wife, was about to get a front row seat to his biggest mistake. And Laura? Laura was about to find out what it really felt like to lose everything. I walked out of that hotel room without another word, leaving Laura sobbing and Ben clutching his bruised face. Matt followed, slipping his phone back into his pocket, his expression unreadable. By the time we got to my car, my hands were still shaking. Not from fear, not from regret, from the pure, unfiltered rage still boiling under my skin. Matt leaned against the passenger door, arms crossed. You sure you don't want to go back up there and finish the job? I let out a harsh laugh. Oh, I'm finishing the job, just not the way they expect. I unlocked the car, climbed into the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. First call? Sophie, Ben's wife. She picked up on the third ring, her voice bright and unsuspecting. Hey Jack, what's up? I gripped the wheel. Hey sophomore, I need to see you. It's about Ben. There was a pause. What's wrong? I took a breath, steadying myself. It's not something I can say over the phone. Just meet me at your place. Now. Jack, you're scaring me. You should be scared, I said. See you in 10. I hung up. Matt slid into the passenger seat, watching me carefully. You sure about this? I started the engine. 100%. Sophie opened the door the second I pulled up. She was still in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, barefoot, her face a mixture of confusion and worry. Jack, what's going on? I stepped inside, barely able to look at her. Sophie and I had known each other for years. She was family. She trusted me, trusted him. And Ben had thrown that away like it meant nothing. I pulled out my phone, opened the video Matt had recorded, and handed it to her. Watch. She frowned but pressed play. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, after a few seconds, a sharp inhale. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled as she clutched the phone, eyes locked on the screen. When the video ended, she slowly looked up at me. I don't understand. I exhaled.
I'm sorry, Sophie.
I really am. She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to wake herself up from a nightmare. Then, without warning, she bolted to the kitchen. I followed, watching as she grabbed a bottle of wine, yanked the cork out with shaking hands, and poured herself a full glass. She downed half of it in one go. Matt raised an eyebrow. You good? She slammed the glass on the counter. Am I good? No, Matt, I'm not good. My husband is screwing Laura. And apparently, the entire world knew before I did. I swallowed. I swear, I only found out yesterday. I wouldn't have. She held up a hand, stopping me. I believe you. Then her expression darkened. But Ben? Oh, that bastard is done. I felt the first flicker of satisfaction. Sophie was never the type to cry over a man. No, she was the type to burn his life to the ground. She set her wine down, straightened her shoulders, and met my eyes. What's the plan? I smirked. I thought you'd never ask. By the time Laura and Ben made it home that evening, the damage was already done. Sophie had packed Ben's bags and left them outside, along with a handwritten note taped to the door. Don't bother coming in. I know everything. Check your email for the divorce papers. And as for Laura, well, she walked into a house stripped of anything that mattered to her. The locks were changed. Her bags were packed. And waiting for her on the dining table was a neatly printed folder labeled, The cost of betrayal. Inside, copies of the video, screenshots of her deleted messages, a formal divorce petition, and a letter from me, her soon-to-be ex-husband. Laura, I once thought you were my greatest love. Turns out you were just my greatest mistake. You threw away everything we built for a fling in a cheap hotel. So now you get nothing. Enjoy your new life. Alone. Jack. I made sure I wasn't there when she found it. Because there was nothing left to say. Sophie and I sat in her living room watching the clock. She swirled the last bit of wine in her glass, eyes locked on the front door like she was waiting for a storm to hit. Ben was due home any minute. I leaned back, arms crossed. You sure you don't want to do this over the phone? She scoffed. And let him try to talk his way out of it? No. I want to see his face when he realizes he's lost everything. I smirked. That's cold. She downed the last sip. Damn right it is. Headlights flashed through the window. A car rolled into the driveway. Showtime. Sophie stood, smoothing her sweatshirt like she was preparing for battle. I stayed seated. This was her moment. The front door opened. Ben stepped inside, tossing his keys onto the table like he always did. Hey, babe, you won't believe the day I had. Then he saw the suitcases. And the note. For a moment he just stared. Then he frowned, picking up the paper, eyes scanning the words. His face paled. Sophie, what is this? She crossed her arms. What do you think it is? Ben's gaze flickered to me, sitting calmly on the couch. Then back to Sophie. This is a joke, right? He let out a nervous chuckle. Come on, babe. You're overreacting. She threw her phone at him. Not hard, but enough for him to fumble and catch it. The screen was already open, playing the video, Matt's video, his entire affair with Laura, caught in crystal clear definition. I watched as Ben's expression shifted from confusion to horror. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Sophie, don't. Her voice was sharp, deadly. Don't say a single damn word. Because nothing you say is going to fix this. Ben ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely panicked now. Babe, listen. No, she snapped. You listen. You don't live here anymore. You don't have a wife anymore. You don't have anything anymore. She stepped closer, voice shaking with anger. I have been loyal to you. I have defended you. And this is how you repay me. He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he turned to me. Jack, man, you gotta help me out here. I laughed. Actually laughed. Help you? I shook my head. You must be out of your damn mind. He gestured wildly at Sophie. She's making a mistake. She let out a bitter laugh. The only mistake I made was marrying you. Ben's face twisted in desperation. Baby, please. Sophie grabbed his suitcases and shoved them against his chest, forcing him back toward the door. Take your crap and get out. Ben hesitated, looking between us. Then, finally, he seemed to realize he had no way out of this. Defeated, he picked up his bags and walked out. Sophie didn't watch him go. She just slammed the door shut behind him. The house fell silent. For a few long seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Sophie exhaled, running a hand through her hair. Well, she turned to me, smirking. That felt amazing. I grinned. Told you. She flopped onto the couch next to me, letting out a slow breath. And Laura? She'll be getting her surprise right about now. Sophie leaned back, satisfied. Wish I could see it. I chuckled. Oh, trust me. I made sure it'd be unforgettable. Across town, Laura stood frozen in our now empty house. Her suitcase sat by the door. The locks were changed, and on the table, waiting for her, was the letter. She picked it up with trembling hands, scanning the words. Her breath hitched, her vision blurred. She had lost everything. And the worst part? She had no one to blame but herself. Laura stood in the empty house, gripping the letter so hard her knuckles turned white. She read it once, then again, as if the words would magically change. As if this wasn't real. But it was. The locks were changed. The pictures were gone. The house, the home she once ruled, felt like a hollow shell of what it used to be. Her suitcase sat by the door like an afterthought, like she was a guest in her own life. And the worst part? It wasn't just the house. It was everything. She reached for her phone with shaking fingers, dialing my number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again. Nothing. Finally, she sent a text. "Laura, Jack, please. Let's talk." No response. Her stomach twisted with panic. She hadn't expected it to be this bad. Hadn't expected me to be so ruthless. She tried calling Ben. Straight to voicemail. She let out a choked breath, her mind racing. She needed somewhere to go. Someone to fix this. And so, she made a mistake. She drove to Sophie's house. By the time she pulled into the driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, quiet, but Laura didn't care. She marched up to the door and rang the bell. Then again, and again. Finally, the porch light flicked on. The door opened a crack. Sophie stood there, dressed in an oversized sweater, a glass of wine in her hand. She took one look at Laura and smirked. "Wow," she said. "You look like crap." Laura's lip trembled. "Sophie, please. I had nowhere else to go." Sophie tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "That's rough." Then she took a sip of wine and said, "Not my problem." Laura flinched. "I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to screw my husband?" Sophie cut in. "You didn't mean to stab me in the back? Save it. Soft, please." "No," Sophie said coldly. "You don't get to please me. You don't get to ask for anything. Because you lost." Laura swallowed hard. Sophie stepped forward, lowering her voice to a lethal whisper. "You threw away a husband who loved you. For what?" She let out a bitter laugh. "A few cheap hotel rooms? A fling with a married man?" Laura's face crumpled. I wasn't thinking." "No, you weren't," Sophie agreed. "And now? You have nothing." Laura's breath hitched. Sophie took another slow sip of wine. Then, with a satisfied smirk, she stepped back and said, "Now get the hell off my porch." And with that, she slammed the door in Laura's face. 15 minutes later, Laura sat in her car, staring blankly at the steering wheel. She had nowhere to go. No husband, no best friend, no home. Her world was in ruins. And I was sleeping like a baby, because tomorrow was the grand finale. And Laura had no idea what was coming next. Laura called me 15 times that night. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, sobbing, begging. Then she switched tactics. Angry texts, blaming me for overreacting, claiming it was a mistake, and that we could fix this. I ignored every single one. She was drowning, and she knew it. The next morning, Matt and I sat at a diner, sipping coffee as I scrolled through my messages. Matt smirked. "She's still blowing up your phone?" "Non-stop." I set it down. "Ben too." Matt snorted. "They probably thought they could slither out of this. They don't get to." And just as I said it, my phone lit up again. "Not Laura. Sophie." I answered immediately. "Hey, you need to come over. Now." There was something in her tone. Something sharp. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Just get here." 15 minutes later, I pulled up to Sophie's house. She was standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching the street like she was waiting for a fight. I barely stepped out of the car before she turned to me. "You're not gonna believe this." "What?" She pulled out her phone this time and held it up. I squinted at the screen. It was a screenshot. From Laura. A text. "We need to talk. You don't know everything." I exhaled sharply. "She's just trying to manipulate you." Sophie shook her head. "Maybe. But I want to know what the hell she thinks she has to say." I frowned. "You're seriously considering meeting her?" She crossed her arms. "Not alone." I stared at her, then let out a slow breath. "Fine." Sophie typed back. 1 hour. My place. Don't try anything stupid. Laura responded immediately. "I'll be there." I didn't know what I expected when Laura finally showed up. Tears? Regret? A pathetic, last-ditch plea to fix what she destroyed? But the woman who stepped out of the car wasn't just desperate. She looked determined. And that's when I knew. She was about to drop a bomb. Laura stepped up onto Sophie's porch, looking between us with wild, frantic eyes. "You have to listen to me," she said, voice shaking. Sophie's arms stayed crossed. "Talk." Laura swallowed, then turned to me. "Jack, you don't know the whole story." I scoffed. "Oh, I think I do." She shook her head, glancing at Sophie. "Ben lied to you." Sophie tensed beside me. "Excuse me?" Laura took a slow breath. "He's been sleeping with more than just me." Silence. Then, Sophie laughed. A dry, bitter sound. "Oh, you think I didn't expect that?" She shook her head. "You're telling me this like it's news." Laura's jaw clenched. "I mean recently." Something in her tone made Sophie hesitate. "Ben has been seeing another woman," Laura continued. "For months." Sophie blinked. "Who?" Laura exhaled. "Your best friend, Jenna." The world tilted for a second. Sophie's face went blank. Then, slowly, she let out a breath. "I see." Laura hesitated.
I'm sorry, Saf.
"I really am." Sophie stared at her. "You're sorry now?" Laura winced. Cleared my throat. "So that's it? That's your big confession?" Laura flinched like she wanted to say more, like she was still holding something back. But then she nodded. "That's it." Sophie stepped closer. "I appreciate the information," she said, voice eerily calm. "Now get the hell off my porch." Laura looked at me one last time, like she wanted me to stop her. I didn't. She turned and left. Sophie didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, she sighed. "I need a drink." I laughed. "I'll pour." She smirked. "Good man." That night, Sophie sent Ben one last message. "Thanks for making this easier. I'll let my lawyer handle the rest." And me? I finally blocked Laura's number. She was just another ghost now. And I was free.